Story 1. Husband wanted to divorce me over photos of me hugging coworkers. Turns out his best friend was setting me up so her pregnant cousin could trap him for his inheritance. I know the internet can be pretty harsh sometimes, especially with relationship posts like these. Trust me, I've seen how brutal the comments can get. So I'm really hoping you all can be understanding. Before I get into everything that's happening, let me give you a quick introduction. I'm Aaron, 30 years old and working in the legal field. Past month has basically turned my entire life upside down, and I really need some outside perspective on what I should do next. Marcus and I had what I thought was a perfect marriage, 4 years of building a life together, supporting each other through everything. Job changes, family drama, even that time we had to live with his parents for 3 months while our house was being renovated. We were that couple who everyone said would make it. Even during our worst arguments, we'd always find a way to work things out together, usually over late night ice cream and stupid movies. That's what made his cheating accusation so shocking. He suddenly started claiming he had proof I was unfaithful, saying it was bound to happen because I work in a male-dominated legal department. This coming from the same man who used to proudly tell everyone how his wife was breaking barriers in her field. The way it all started still feels surreal. 2 weeks ago, he came home looking completely crushed. I remember I was cooking his favorite pasta, thinking we'd have a nice dinner together. Instead, he just mumbled something about needing space and went straight to bed. I figured maybe he lost a big client at work or had a rough meeting. He's always been the type to process things alone before talking about them, so I gave him his space. Never in a million years did I imagine what was actually going through his mind. If I had known, maybe I could have stopped this whole mess before it spiraled out of control. The next day, Marcus was gone before sunrise, something he'd never done in 4 years of marriage. Just a cold text saying he was running late and had done all the work. At first I tried to rationalize it. Plus, this was the guy who'd never miss our morning coffee routine. He even bought us matching mugs that said grumpy before coffee. But then 3 days passed, and things got worse. He'd stumble home after midnight, completely drunk, him who usually only had a beer or two at most. One night, he even knocked over our wedding photos and just left them there on the floor. Marcus, yeah, I should probably mention his name now, started sleeping in the guest room, the same room we'd spent weeks decorating together for visitors. Now it became his escape from me. I'd hear him come home late, grab his things, and shut that door without a word. Missing him at home was one thing, but he even disappeared on weekends, the time we usually spent grocery shopping together and trying new breakfast places. I kept waiting for him to snap out of it, but deep down, this growing distance felt like watching our marriage slip through my fingers. I wanted to talk to him, figure out what was happening, but how do you confront someone who's become a ghost in their own home? I decided to try our old lunch surprise routine, the one where I'd show up at his office with his favorite takeout. We used to do this every other week before all this started. He'd always get excited seeing me walk in with food from that Vietnamese place he loves. His coworkers used to joke about how we were still in our honeymoon phase. So I left work early, got his usual order plus those spring rolls he can never resist, and headed to his office. When I got there, his coworker gave me some excuse about Marcus being too busy for lunch. But then I saw them both at the cafe across the street, sitting there laughing like everything was normal. I just stood there, holding that stupid takeout bag, watching my husband actively avoid me. I spent the whole drive home crying in my car in the parking lot of our favorite grocery store, the one where we had our first date, because he claimed he needed help picking ripe avocados. That night, all I got was a text saying he was staying at a friend's. The next morning though, he finally showed up. For a second, seeing him walk in with a file, I actually thought maybe it was work stuff he wanted to discuss. But no, right there in our living room, he dropped divorce papers on the coffee table already signed, just waiting for my signature. 4 years of marriage, of building a life together, and he was ending it all with a stack of papers that looked like they came straight from a printer. When I pressed him about why he wanted a divorce, he just sat there silently at first. This man, who used to talk through everything with me, who'd stay up all night discussing our smallest disagreements, wouldn't even look me in the eye. Then suddenly he exploded, saying he regretted ever marrying me, and that I destroyed him. The worst part came next. He accused me of cheating with multiple men from my office. Me, who still has the movie ticket stub from our first date in my wallet. Me, who changed jobs last year because the commute meant less time with him. For 4 straight days, I tried everything to prove my innocence. I offered him my phone, my work email, my laptop, literally my entire digital life. I even told him to talk to anyone at my workplace. His big proof, a bunch of photos that made my completely normal interactions look suspicious. There was one of me hugging Kyle from accounting at his farewell party, the same party Marcus couldn't attend because of his business trip. Another showed me having coffee with Jeremy, my best friend since law school, at our usual spot. The photo was taken from this weird angle that made our casual conversation look intimate. Mind you, Jeremy is the same guy who helped Marcus plan his proposal to me, and whose girlfriend usually joins us for these coffee meetups. The photos look like they were deliberately taken to create drama, but Marcus, who knows every single one of these people, and who's had dinners with them, was suddenly seeing everything with completely different eyes. I started laughing when he showed me these photos, because the whole thing was so ridiculous. The coffee shop picture Jeremy's girlfriend, Sandra, showed up literally 5 minutes later. We were just waiting for her because she was stuck in traffic. Sandra and I even went shopping afterward and bought matching plant pots. And those office photos, I am one of 3 women in a department of 20 people. Of course I interact with male colleagues. Just last month, Marcus was bragging to his family about how I was handling major cases and working directly with senior partners. He used to be so proud of my career, even helped me prepare for big meetings. Now, suddenly, every professional interaction was suspicious. It's like he forgot all those times he came to office parties and met everyone himself. But nothing I said mattered anymore. He just kept pushing those divorce papers toward me, saying he wanted me out of his life. I showed him everything. My phone, my messages, my emails. I even offered to call Sandra right then to confirm everything. But he completely shut down, like he'd already decided what to believe. Then came the final blow. He gave me 48 hours to get out of our house, the same house we spent months hunting for, where we stayed up all night painting walls and arguing about furniture placement. Now he was threatening legal action if I didn't leave 2 days to prove my innocence, to save my marriage, and to somehow make sense of how my life had imploded so completely. How do you even start packing up 4 years of marriage in 48 hours? The whole time, something about these photos felt off. They were too perfectly timed, too perfectly angled, like someone was following me around waiting for any interaction they could twist. When I finally discovered who was behind it all, everything clicked into place. It was Adriana, Marcus's supposed best friend from college. I found out by doing something I never thought I would, checking his phone while he was in the bathroom. In my defense, when your entire marriage is falling apart and you're about to be kicked out of your own home, desperate times call for desperate measures. Plus, this was the same phone I used to help him set up, the one where we'd share funny memes and photos of dogs we wanted to adopt someday. Those 5 minutes scrolling through his messages were enough to make me angry. There was Adriana, systematically poisoning Marcus's mind against me, message after message questioning everything about my life. What kind of wife meets male friends for coffee? Don't you think it's suspicious she chose to work in a male-dominated field? She'd send these little comments daily, planting seeds of doubt. The worst part, I used to invite her over for dinner, tried to include her in our lives because I knew how important she was to Marcus. I even defended her when my friend said she seemed weirdly possessive of him. Now here she was, methodically trying to destroy my marriage, and my husband was eating up every word like it was gospel truth. After seeing those messages, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Adriana's house. You know, the one Marcus helped her move into last year, because that's what best friends do. But before I get into what went down there, let me explain why I wasn't exactly surprised that Adriana was behind all this. The tension between us goes way back to when Marcus and I first started dating. From day one, she made it painfully obvious that she disapproved of me. I still remember our first meeting at a cafe. I reached out to shake her hand, and she looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Right in front of me, she asked Marcus if he was really sure about dating someone like me. At our engagement party, she spent the whole night making backhanded comments about how quickly we were moving. Even at our wedding, she showed up late, gave this weird speech about how she'd always be there for Marcus, and left early. Everyone saw through her act except Marcus. I always suspected she had feelings for him, but whenever I brought it up, Marcus would just laugh it off and say they were like siblings. He'd tell me stories about how they grew up together, shared classes, and how she was just protective. Now I was seeing exactly how protective she could be. I should have seen this coming. The night before our wedding, she actually cornered Marcus at our rehearsal dinner and told him he'd regret marrying me. Marcus mentioned it casually the next morning while we were getting ready, laughing it off as his classic Sam being overprotective. I remember feeling uneasy, but pushed it aside because, well, it was my wedding day. 4 years later, here we are, her prediction becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy, not because I did anything wrong, but because she'd been playing the long game, waiting for the perfect moment to swoop in and claim Marcus for herself. All those times she'd show up at our house unannounced, claiming she was just in the neighborhood, suddenly made sense. When I got to her place, she initially pretended she wasn't home, real mature for someone who'd just blown up my entire life. But the moment I mentioned Marcus was divorcing me, that door flew open faster than you'd believe. The smug look on her face made my skin crawl, standing in her doorway surrounded by photos of her and Marcus from college. Seriously, who keeps that many photos of their friend? I cut straight to the chase and asked her why she'd manipulated him with lies about me cheating. Her response? I'm just trying to save my best friend from a toxic relationship. Save him from what? Our weekly game nights? Our plans to start a family? She stood there acting all righteous, like she was doing Marcus some kind of favor by destroying our marriage. I kept trying to explain to Adriana that her proof was just normal moments from my life, twisted to look suspicious, but she wasn't having it. She actually stood there and told me I should just let Marcus go, like she was doing everyone a favor. The weird part was how she kept referring to their future, not his future, their future. When I finally asked her straight up if she had feelings for my husband, she got super defensive. "He's like my brother," she said, but the way she practically slammed the door in my face said otherwise. This is the same woman who cried at our wedding, not happy tears, mind you, and now she's orchestrating its end. Back home, I tried one last time with Marcus. Conversation still replays in my head. I asked him why he never once came to me with his doubts, why he let Adriana feed him these stories without even questioning them. His response? "I trust Adriana more than you." Just like that, 4 years of marriage meant less than his college friend's word. Now I'm sitting here in our house, well, I guess it's his house now, with boxes half packed and 24 hours left before I have to leave. The same house where we spent our first Christmas together, where we talked about having kids someday. I know I'm innocent, but somehow I still feel guilty, like maybe I could have done something differently. I've tried everything I can think of to prove my innocence, but it's like talking to a wall. I really need advice here. What would you do if your spouse trusted their friend more than their own partner? How do you fight against someone who spent years plotting your downfall? I'm completely lost and could use any suggestions. Update 1. Hey everyone, coming back with an update after a few weeks. First off, I'm genuinely overwhelmed by all the support in my DMs and comments. Reading your stories and advice has given me some hope during my 3:00 a.m. crying sessions, which have become less frequent, thankfully. Special shout out to the person who sent me that care package with chocolate and wine. You're an actual angel. Though I have to address something real quick. To the keyboard warrior in my comments claiming I'm making this up seriously. I've spent the last 4 years building a life with Marcus, planning our future, dealing with his mom's passive-aggressive comments about when we're having kids, and working my way up in my career. I don't need to prove myself to random internet strangers who probably can't even maintain a houseplant. Now, for the actual update. I know it's only been a few weeks since my last post, but so much has happened that I need to share. Honestly, I wasn't planning to post again so soon. I've been trying to keep busy with work and processing everything, but seeing how many people reached out with similar stories about toxic friendships ruining their relationships made me realize I'm not alone in this mess. Plus, with everything that's happened recently, I definitely need some outside perspective. Again, these past 2 weeks have been surreal. I'm currently crashing at my friend Chelsea's place. She's been an absolute saint through all of this. When I showed up at her door at 11:00 p.m., with 3 suitcases and mascara running down my face, she just pulled me into a hug and made up her guest room without asking questions. She even helped me start apartment hunting, though honestly, I still can't believe I'm looking for a new place to live. It feels like just yesterday Marcus and I were arguing about what color to paint our bedroom walls. I won that argument. By the way, sage green was definitely the right choice. So here's where things get interesting, and by interesting, I mean straight out of a bad drama series. I had to go back to our house to grab my laptop and other electronics because there's only so much you can pack when your husband gives you 48 hours to vacate your entire life. As I'm walking up to the house, guess who I see leaving? Adriana, looking way too comfortable in my former home with some mystery woman I'd never seen before. They were probably there to comfort poor Marcus, you know, the guy who supposedly got cheated on by his evil wife who, checks notes, dared to have male colleagues and friends. The way they were acting, you'd think Marcus was some wounded hero, rather than a grown man who chose to believe his manipulative friend over his wife of 4 years. Going back into that house felt like entering a parallel universe. Marcus wouldn't even look at me, the same guy who used to text me heart emojis from upstairs when we were both working from home. I tried keeping it strictly business, just there for my stuff, but I couldn't help wondering about this mystery woman who'd left with Adriana. Marcus practically ran. Upstairs, when I walked in, it felt like I was some kind of virus he might catch. 4 years of marriage reduced to awkwardly collecting my things while my husband hides from me. I even had to leave behind our shared photo albums because I couldn't handle having that conversation. Chelsea kept telling me I was torturing myself by obsessing over who this woman was, that I needed to focus on healing and moving forward. Then, 3 days later, she came home from her lunch break with news. She'd seen Marcus near his office with some woman, and they definitely weren't having a professional meeting. They were sitting close together at that little Italian place where Marcus and I had our 3rd anniversary dinner just months ago. Chelsea said they looked comfortable together, you know, that kind of comfort that takes time to develop. When I asked her to describe the woman, hoping it wasn't who I thought it was, Chelsea just shook her head. The divorce papers weren't even processed yet, and here he was, already moving on like our marriage meant nothing. The same man who once said he couldn't sleep without hearing me say goodnight was now having cozy lunch dates while I was still wearing my wedding ring. That night, I stress, bought ice cream and headed to the grocery store, trying to distract myself from everything. Instead, the universe decided to mess with me. There was Marcus with the same woman from our house. My brain knew I should just grab my Ben & Jerry's and leave, but my feet had other plans. I followed them. Not my proudest moment, but hey, we all do crazy things when our world falls apart. They ended up at Memorial Park, where Marcus proposed to me during the winter festival, and there they were, kissing on the same bench where we used to share our lunch breaks. I don't even remember running away. I just ended up back in my car hyperventilating. I couldn't leave it alone though. I borrowed Chelsea's phone since Marcus had blocked mine. Real mature, right? When I called and asked about this woman, his response felt like another slap in the face. He was actually proud to tell me he was dating her, saying she was helping him heal from his trauma. Trauma from what? Our movie nights and Sunday brunches? She's Adriana's cousin. That's right. While I was being accused of cheating, Adriana was playing matchmaker with her cousin. Marcus had the nerve to call it karma, like somehow him jumping into a new relationship before our divorce was even final was justified because of things I never even did. The same man who couldn't handle me having coffee with my male best friend was now dating his best friend's cousin, who conveniently showed up right when our marriage started falling apart. After that phone call, I swore I was done with Marcus and his drama. I deleted his number and unfriended his family on social media, the whole post-breakup routine. But then I stumbled onto something that changed everything. Turns out Rachel, that's Adriana's cousin, is pregnant, and suddenly all these puzzle pieces started falling into place. The rush divorce, the quick new relationship, it all makes sense. If Marcus got her pregnant, he needed a clean break from our marriage. Real convenient how I became the supposed cheater right when he needed an exit strategy. I know all this because I did something slightly crazy after seeing them together that day. I followed Rachel. Yeah, I know I'm turning into some amateur detective these days. But instead of going home, she went straight to Adriana's place. I ended up outside their window. Trust me, I know how this sounds, and I caught bits of their conversation. He'll get to know soon, and this is all going to come to an end, and something about my child. I couldn't catch everything. Turns out real life surveillance isn't as clear as it is in movies, especially when you're trying not to look suspicious, crouching behind someone's hydrangeas. But what I did hear was enough to make my head spin. Now I'm back at Chelsea's place, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do with this information. My marriage imploded because I had male friends, but Marcus might have actually gotten another woman pregnant. The irony would be funny if it wasn't my life. Has anyone dealt with something like this before? Because I'm completely lost here. Update. Hey everyone, back with another update after what feels like the longest week of my life. First off, major thanks for all the support on my last post. Your comments and messages have kept me going through some really dark nights. I haven't been sleeping much lately. You know that fun thing where your brain decides 300 AM is the perfect time to replay every moment of your failed marriage? Yeah, that's been my routine. But your support has helped me stay focused on fighting for myself instead of just curling up in Chelsea's guest room forever with my ice cream and rom-coms. So here's the thing about trying to move on. Just when you think you're making progress, life doesn't work as planned. Everyone who read my last post knows about Rachel's pregnancy, and I was convinced it was Marcus's baby. I mean, it made sense, right? Guy suddenly accuses faithful wife of cheating, moves on suspiciously fast with a new girlfriend. Girlfriend turns out to be pregnant. It's like a bad Lifetime movie plot. It turns out the truth is even messier than I imagined. This whole situation has more layers than that lasagna Marcus's mom used to make at Christmas, which, by the way, was always way too dry. But I was too nice to say anything. Looking back at my first encounter with Rachel, some things didn't add up. Everyone was acting like she was far along enough in her pregnancy for it to be some urgent situation with Marcus. But she didn't show any signs at all, not even the little things I'd noticed when my sister was pregnant. No water bottle constantly at hand, no careful way of sitting, nothing. The whole thing felt off, like when you know someone's lying but can't prove it yet, so I decided to do some detective work. Yes, I became that person who follows people around, definitely not how I imagined spending my time after separation. I borrowed my coworker's car, told her I needed it for surprise party planning, and followed Rachel and Adriana one afternoon. They went to Valley View Maternity Clinic, which confirmed Rachel was actually pregnant, but it was just a first-month checkup. The timing made zero sense for this to be Marcus' baby, considering when they started dating. After their appointment, they headed to that new bistro downtown. I waited a few minutes, then walked in wearing sunglasses and a hat like some spy and managed to get the table right behind them. The host gave me a weird look when I insisted on sitting with my back to them, but whatever, desperate times. And let me tell you, the conversation I overheard was worth every awkward moment of pretending to be deeply interested in my menu for an hour straight. Turns out, Adriana wasn't just trying to break up my marriage out of some weird obsession with Marcus. She was running a full-on con with her cousin. She's apparently drowning in debt, something about failed investments and Max, out credit cards, and instead of getting a financial advisor, like a normal person, she cooked up this whole scheme. Rachel was just her pawn in this mess. They were planning to manipulate Marcus into thinking he got Rachel pregnant during some drunken night that never actually happened. Rachel actually seemed uncomfortable with the whole thing, kept saying Marcus was too nice for this kind of manipulation. But Adriana, being the master manipulator she is, kept pushing, saying it was their only option for financial security. Their entire plan came out over overpriced pasta and wine, which, by the way, Rachel wasn't drinking. At least she's committed to the pregnancy act. They were going to wait until Rachel was showing a bit more, then convince Marcus that one night when he was too drunk to remember clearly, something happened between them. The timeline wouldn't add up if anyone looked too closely, but they were counting on Marcus being too honorable to question it. Adriana had it all mapped out. Once Marcus married Rachel, they'd have access to his savings, and that inheritance he got from his grandfather last year, the same inheritance we were planning to use as a down payment on our dream house. The whole time I'm sitting there, gripping my water glass so hard I thought it might shatter, listening to them plan how to scam the man I still technically call my husband. Adriana wasn't just trying to steal my husband anymore, she was trying to steal his entire future. Just when I thought this story couldn't get more twisted, there was another thing. Apparently, Rachel's ex-fiancé dumped her after finding out about the pregnancy, and instead of dealing with that mess, Adriana decided to use Marcus as their backup plan. Real classy. But here is where it gets interesting. 3 days after I overheard their conversation, guess who shows up at Chelsea's door looking like a lost puppy? Marcus, standing there with our favorite takeout and begging me not to sign the divorce papers. The same man who couldn't even look at me 2 weeks ago was suddenly talking about reconciliation and how he still believes in us. The reason for this complete 180? Remember me sitting in that restaurant pretending to be fascinated by my phone? Well, I wasn't just scrolling through Instagram. I was recording everything. Yeah, I know, it's probably not the most ethical thing, but desperate times and all that. I emailed the whole conversation to Marcus that same night. At first, he tried to deny it, claiming I'd somehow faked the recording because apparently, I'm both a cheater and an audio editing expert. Then he confronted them, and oh boy, did things get messy. Marcus, who's known Adriana since college, finally saw her true colors. She actually tried to spin some story about doing it all for his own good, but that fell apart pretty quickly. Rachel broke down and confessed everything. Marcus went full lawyer mode on them, threatening legal action for defamation and fraud. Turns out, the prospect of paying damages they couldn't afford was enough to send them running. These two women, who'd been so confident about their little scheme, just disappeared. No dramatic showdown, no tearful apologies, just gone when they realized their plan had backfired. But before all that, Marcus still tried to turn it around on me. He actually suggested that I doctored the recording because I was desperate to get him back. Yeah, because that makes total sense. I had to spell it out for him. His precious best friend and her cousin were trying to scam him out of his inheritance and savings, the same money we once talked about using to start our family. It took him way too long to finally see the truth. So now, here's my dilemma, and I really need your honest opinions. Marcus wants to reconcile. He keeps sending these long texts about how sorry he is, and how he should have trusted me, but I can't forget how quickly he turned on me. 4 years of marriage, and he chose to believe Adriana's lies over my truth. He didn't even try to talk to me about his suspicions, just went straight to divorce papers and kicking me out. Sure, he was manipulated, but doesn't his reaction say something about how much he actually trusts me? Would you take back someone who threw away your entire marriage based on his friend's word? Final update. Hello everyone. Yep, the woman whose husband almost left her for a fake pregnancy scheme is back with one final update. For those just joining this soap opera, check my post history, because this last update is wild. Sorry for going MIA for a month. I've been busy setting up my new place and honestly just processing everything. I'm finally feeling settled in my new apartment, which, by the way, has this amazing kitchen that Marcus would have hated. Guess who shows up at my door looking desperate? Adriana and Rachel. These two had the audacity to come to my place after everything they did, but instead of slamming the door in their faces like any normal person would, I had a better idea. They were broke, desperate, and needed work, and my petty side saw an opportunity for some sweet revenge. So I hired them as my housekeepers. I'm trying so hard not to laugh while typing this. You know how they say revenge is best served cold? Well, mine came with a side of cleaning supplies and a whole lot of karma. Let me tell you exactly how I turned these wannabe con artists into my personal cleaning crew. The absolute audacity of these two showing up at my door still blows my mind. There's Adriana, who spent months plotting to destroy my marriage, and Rachel, who was ready to trap my husband with a fake pregnancy story, standing there looking like sad puppies. They actually had the nerve to ask me to help convince Marcus to forgive them because he'll listen to me now that he feels guilty, right? Because that's exactly what you do after you wreck someone's life, ask them for favors. They kept saying they'd do anything to make it up to me, anything. Now that got my attention. I was sitting there in my half-unpacked apartment, still surrounded by moving boxes, including the one with all our wedding photos that I still haven't decided what to do with, when this beautifully petty idea hit me. I told them I'd consider helping them if they worked as my personal housekeepers. You should have seen Adriana's face. This woman, who used to act like she was too good to even sit at the same table as me, was now being offered a job cleaning my toilets. This part? She was so desperate, she couldn't even hesitate. Remember how she used to brag about her designer bags and fancy brunches? Now, she's scrubbing my floors with those same manicured hands. Both of them started the next day bright and early, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. I may have gone a little overboard with the cleaning supply shopping, but hey, if you're going to get revenge, you might as well make it sparkle. I actually started feeling a bit sorry for Rachel. It was pretty clear she was just another victim of Adriana's manipulation. The same way Adriana had played Marcus, she'd been playing her own cousin, dragging her into this mess. After a week of intense cleaning, I may have been extra picky about baseboards and window tracks. They were both at their breaking point. Then came the day that made it all worth it. Rachel accidentally knocked over a bucket of water that splashed all over Adriana's expensive shoes, the ones she probably bought with credit card debt, and everything exploded. Suddenly, my living room turned into a WWE ring. Adriana completely lost it, slapping Rachel and screaming about how this was all her fault. Rich, coming from the person who masterminded the whole scam. Rachel, finally finding her backbone, started hitting back. Next thing I know, they're rolling around on my freshly mopped floors. The irony. Pulling hair and screaming about who ruined whose life. My neighbors probably thought I was running some kind of fight club. While they were fighting, all their secrets came pouring out. Turns out, Adriana had been stealing money from Rachel for years, using her cousin's credit cards and manipulating her into sketchy schemes way before the whole Marcus situation. I let them go at it for a minute, okay, maybe two. It was entertaining, before stepping in because they were getting close to my nudity. I fired them on the spot, telling them they clearly weren't cut out for honest work. When they started begging for another chance, I just smiled and reminded them they had 5 minutes to leave before I called the cops. Watching them scramble out of my apartment, still yelling at each other, was better than any revenge I could have planned. Sometimes you just have to let karma do its thing. As for the Marcus situation, I finally made my decision. After all the begging and apologizing texts, seriously, my phone was blowing up worse than during our dating days. I chose not to take him back. Here's the thing. This is a man who threw away 4 years of marriage because his friend showed him some photos of me hugging coworkers. He didn't even try to have a conversation about it. He just went straight to divorce papers and kicked me out of our home. Sure, Adriana manipulated him, but she didn't force him to stop trusting his wife overnight. The fact that he could flip on me so quickly showed me everything I needed to know about our foundation. So, here's my final update. I signed those divorce papers last week. Yeah, the same ones he originally thrust at me when he thought I was the bad guy. Marcus is still calling and texting, talking about how we can rebuild and how he'll make it up to me, but honestly, I'm good. My new apartment doesn't have his mom's weird angel figurines watching me from every corner. I can watch reality TV without him complaining, and I'm sleeping better than I have in months. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer, it's moving on and thriving without them. So thank you all for being part of this crazy journey. Your support helped me stay strong when I was ready to cave. But before I go, I'll leave you with one last question, because apparently I'm still processing this. Would you have taken him back? The man I planned my future with turned out to be someone who trusted his manipulative best friend more than his wife. But he was also my best friend for so long. Tell me your thoughts, but make it quick, because I've got a date with a bottle of wine that definitely won't judge me. Story 2. Found love again after my wife passed away, then caught my best friend and my new girlfriend having fun in my kitchen. So, I got him arrested while she was on vacation. My wife, Rachel, and I grew up in a largish town of close to 30,000 people. We knew each other at an early age, roughly 6 or 7. Can't specifically remember. We were practically inseparable. At 16, we started dating each other, and when we turned 18, we moved away for work in a city just a few hours' drive away. By 20, we were married and had bought our first house. At 22, we discovered that she was pregnant with a boy. It was then disaster struck. About 5 weeks before she was due to go on maternity leave, a large shelving unit collapsed and crushed her. I was told that both she and our child were killed instantly. 2 of her colleagues had also been injured in the accident. One was left paralyzed, the other losing his leg after it had to be amputated. The company she was working for, in a cost-cutting measure, decided to continue using old shelving that had been written off as unsafe instead of replacing it. I still haven't quite forgiven those executives and management personnel that made that decision because they cut short the love of my life as well as killing our unborn child. It wasn't long after I was told I had a choice on how to proceed with what her company called compensation, but I called it blood money. They wanted to settle out of court to avoid a lawsuit. I, on the other hand, was out for their blood. Just to clarify here, this is not the revenge. This is still backstory. Fortunately, due to the coverage that it got and involving several politicians, the case was settled quickly in court, roughly 3 years, in which the payout for all parties was close to 10 times the amount that they had initially offered. A lot of fines were given to them for breaches in work health and safety. Executives were sacked, others were jailed, etc. A story for another time, maybe when I feel comfortable sharing. In this time, I was still working my job in telecommunications. My mother, bless her soul, had moved in while all this was happening to help me. I think I would have fallen apart if she hadn't been as involved as she was. It was around this time I was offered a promotion, but it involved a lot of travel around the state. I made a request to have an office in my hometown's branch, as I wanted to not only take care of businesses in the state, but in my hometown also, as there was no business representative located there, to which they agreed. After a few months, we settled into a routine of 1 to 2 weeks in the city office, 1 week in my hometown, and 1 to 2 weeks visiting the rest of the state. After a year, I decided to buy a house in my hometown so I wasn't having to stay at my parents' place every week or so. That was home, and that I could come and go as I pleased. This is important for later in the story. It is about 4 years later that our story begins. Sorry if the backstory was a bit long. I had just returned from one of my trips on Friday and was checking in some stuff at my office when Harry, the branch's managing director, walked in. We had grown up together, but had gone to different schools. Since coming back, we had developed a very close friendship. He asked how things were, and then asked me if I wanted to come to a house party that he was having that evening. Short notice and all, but I said yes. I felt like a few drinks with friends were in order. It was there that Harry introduced me to Catherine. She was a new hire at the branch, where my hometown's office was located, and was getting to know everyone being new in town. We hit it off immediately. As much of a cliché as it sounds, it was almost as if Rachel was in front of me instead of Catherine. I won't bore you too much with the details, but after 2 years of dating, we decided to take the next step and she moved into my hometown's house. Everything up to this point had been going really well. Catherine and my parents got along, and Rachel's parents also approved and were happy that someone could make me just as happy as Rachel had done. All was going well for close to a year when things began to change. Skype sessions were cut short. Suddenly neighbors would tell me about how a car described to me like it was Harry's was always seen parked in the back alley near my house whenever I was away. Some clothes that weren't mine were in my wardrobe. All signs pointed to her cheating, but she said that nothing was happening. She said that Harry would come over occasionally to discuss business, etc., but never stayed the night. I chalked it up to me being paranoid and continued on, as if nothing was wrong, but there was always this feeling that something wasn't right. It was close to 6 months after that I discovered that she had been lying to me. I had just finished closing a rather large contract with a new company, and negotiations had wrapped up earlier than I had anticipated. So, instead of sticking around for the next few days, I decided to pay for an early flight home and surprise everyone. Fast forward a few hours, and I drive into my hometown and down the alley behind my house so that I could get into the house without being seen and surprised. Catherine, some part of me was curious, however, as to whether this mystery car was there. Sure enough, there was a car that was blocking the back entrance gate. I was confused for a moment, wondering if it had just been a neglectful neighbor parking, only to realize that it was indeed Harry's car. If it hadn't been for the high hedge line that I had put in a few years back for privacy, I may as well have driven past my own place. Pulling up behind his car, I got out and thought it was strange that he was there so late, as she claimed that he always left by now. Now, as I approached the back of the house, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In my kitchen, Catherine and Harry were going at it hammer and tongs. I froze. Time stopped. There was my close friend having sex on my kitchen bench with my girlfriend. I didn't know what to do. So many questions were running through my head. Was this real, or was I dreaming? Why were they having sex in my house? Feeling defeated, I turned and left without them seeing me. I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity. I was crying hard, but the sadness quickly turned into anger, the same kind of anger I felt towards those that were responsible for Rachel's death. I wanted to hurt them badly. As a pacifist, I don't believe in violence, but it was then I knew I was going to punish them and destroy their lives. What better time to start than now? I moved my car back up the alley, far enough away from my driveway that I could still see Harry's car, and then walked back to the gate where I could see into the house. I called her phone. They were still going at it when it rang. They both looked at the caller ID and did a double take when my name came up. I could see that she was considering answering it, but they let it ring out. After a few moments, they were back into it again, and I dialed once again. This time, she did answer, but as she was answering, I hung up and made my way back to my car. As soon as I did, she called me back. She asked why I was calling as late as I was, and I told her that I was about 10 minutes from home and didn't want to scare her coming in. She obviously was shocked and acted happy that I was coming, and the call ended very quickly after. She said she was going to get up and get changed into something. I said goodbye and hung up. A few moments later, Harry came peeling through the gate, still half naked, jumped into his car, and took off like a bat out of hell. I smiled a little, knowing the fear that both of them would be feeling from being so close to being caught. I waited a few moments before turning my car into the same place Harry had been moments earlier. The night was fairly uneventful afterward, and it wasn't until after she was asleep that I got up and went to my office down the hall. I couldn't sleep. I needed to plan, and plan I did. The revenge. My mother always taught me to be a pacifist and to allow cosmic karma to take its course, but on this occasion, I decided that karma could use a helping hand. I decided to punish them separately, but destroy both of them. I knew that Harry had a drug habit, nothing major, but he kept it very private. I only knew about it accidentally after seeing some coke left out in his place, but pretended I hadn't seen it when he had made attempts to cover it up. I began calling some of my more unsavory clientele, and made a few discreet inquiries into obtaining some samples that they were willing to part with. A few days later, I had a decent enough stash for my plan to work. About a month later, I had friends, including Harry, around for a barbecue night. After making sure that I sufficiently liquored up Harry, I told him to stay the night and sleep it off. In the early hours of that morning, I took the drugs and an assortment of my personal belongings and placed them at various places around his car, with the biggest stash in his tire well, confident that he wouldn't find them over the few months as the rest of my plan took effect. I locked the car up and went inside to sleep. I also placed some more drugs and personal items in his house after driving him home because he was still too drunk to drive. A few days later, I staged a break-in by smashing the back pane of my back door into my kitchen and leaving it open before heading back to the city for a flight. I had several messages the moment I landed. One from my clearly panicked mom, who had found the back door smashed open and had called the police. One from Catherine in tears, and one from the local police asking me to call. After returning all the calls, I informed the police I was away on business and that I would be back the following week to talk with them. While away, I got Catherine to stay with my parents until after I got back and asked my dad to organize one of the local security companies to install cameras and an alarm system after getting the go-ahead from the police as to not ruin the scene of the crime. After getting home, I did the usual "my God, I can't believe this has happened, and why would anyone do this?" routine. After doing a thorough check of everywhere, finding that the items I had taken were missing and filing a police report, I had the security company's rep talk Catherine and I through how the cameras and alarm system worked. Then came the question. I had been waiting for the question of what happens if we are doing some business and don't want it recorded. She acted a bit shy asking this question, but I knew exactly the reason she was asking. He assured us that this was a question he got asked a lot, and we were shown on the home computer, if we wanted to be doing things without it being recorded, how to stop the recording for certain cameras, so that we could protect her modesty. As I was walking him out, I asked him if, when cameras were turned off, a notification could be sent out just as a security precaution. He came back in and helped me through how to set up email notifications, and left shortly after. Fantastic. All I had to do was wait. At this stage, I approached for some help in relation to Coop's law in my country. I needed to make sure that my upcoming plan could legally be done, and that I would not be forced to pay out any money or equity to Catherine, as I didn't know if we were classified as a de facto couple or not. Being the sole benefactor of Rachel's estate, I didn't want to be left with any nasty surprises where Catherine could take any of the estate away from me. Shout out to those guys and gals there, as they helped me get in contact with a great lawyer who assured me that, although we had been dating for close to 4 years, we had not been living together long enough to be classified as de facto. He also noted that because I was paying all the utilities on the property she was living in, and she didn't pay rent, it showed that she had no legal standing to make a financial claim against me. Just to be sure though, he drew up what I felt was a pretty ironclad document just in case there was any legal trouble. The following week, my work approached me and offered me a promotion to move back to the city and run the team that I was a part of, meaning I wouldn't need to travel as often and be in one location. Due to the success of being located in my hometown, they were considering having 3 to 5 representatives spend 1 to 2 weeks in the larger surrounding towns, including my hometown, as a part of my team. I said yes and began the process of beginning my transfer, which would take about 6 weeks perfect, more than enough time to gather all my evidence. Upon getting back to my hometown the following week, I began to set in motion the rest of my plan. I asked Harry to approve 1 week's worth of vacation for Catherine for 2 weeks' time. I wanted to send her and a friend or two away on a retreat before I made the biggest decision of my life for a second time. He jumped up and gave me a huge hug, congratulating me on being prepared to take the leap again. I hugged him back tight, but not the way I think he imagined it at the time. He agreed and blocked out the week for me. I asked him not to say anything to anyone, as I wanted to make it as big a surprise as I could. I knew that it would spread like wildfire around the office regardless, but that was my plan. That night, I told Catherine that I had booked her and 2 friends to go to a tropical spa resort, all expenses paid, for a week, no questions asked. "Pick 2 friends and come back to the biggest surprise of your life," she screamed like a kid who had just been told that all the candy in the shop was hers to have. I then told her that the following week, I was going to spend it in the city preparing for a large client who was one of my biggest accounts, and I needed some people on my team to help before flying out the following week. I wouldn't be home until the Monday that she was leaving, so I wouldn't be able to see her, which seemed to disappoint her, but I told her it would be worth it when she returned. What I failed to tell her was that I had decided to take 2 weeks vacation on the other side of the country, mentally preparing myself for the storm that was about to erupt the moment she stepped foot on the plane, as well as enjoying my first stage of freedom. On Sunday, 2 weeks later, I flew back and began driving home. Once getting there, I did a quick pass by my house, and sure enough, Harry's car was there, just like the first night I had caught them. I parked a little ways back and checked the cameras, fast asleep in my bed. No surprise, honestly, as I had recorded them constantly doing this over the 2 weeks I had been away. I then made my first call to the police, blocking my caller ID. I told them that I was one of my neighbors and saw someone hanging around in their car in the alley behind my house and occasionally passing something through windows to passing cars, while also looking into my yard. I was concerned that they were dealing drugs and were going to break into someone's property. I gave them his license plate and description. They said they would have someone there in a few minutes, so I thanked them and hung up. I then called Catherine and told her I was about 10 minutes away from home. I knew she was flying out tomorrow but desperately wanted to surprise her. Looking back at the footage now, I laugh at the commotion that I am surprised I didn't hear. In a few short seconds, Harry was half-dressed and flying out the back door to his car. At that point, I couldn't have asked for a more perfect scene. As Harry was peeling away, one of the police cars rounded the corner behind me, saw Harry driving away fast, and gave chase. After pulling in, greeting an excited Catherine, and doing all the couple things, she fell asleep. I, on the other hand, couldn't sleep a wink. The next day, she and her friends were bundled into a car, and after they drove away, I had to wait a few hours. But I began to execute my plan. I called my friend, who was a removalist, and apologized for the late notice but explained that I needed my place packed and moved on Friday. After agreeing on a time, I told him that he would need to take certain boxes to a storage facility, which he said wasn't an issue. Then, I began packing Catherine's belongings. Later that day, I got a call from the police asking me to come and identify some property they had apprehended from a suspect the previous night that fit the description of property I had reported stolen. I grinned to myself, happy that my plan for Harry had come to fruition, and replied that I would be there shortly to collect it. Of course, when I got there, some of the items were still unaccounted for due to the fact that they must have still been in his house, and they hadn't searched there yet. By this stage, the town was buzzing with news. Events in my hometown don't stay secret for long. Harry was disgraced and promptly fired for his possession of drugs and stolen property, and our respective bosses, on behalf of the company, had extended a formal apology toward me during the week. That night, I went to my parents' house and told both mine and Rachel's parents what had happened, omitting certain details and explaining that I was moving back to the city after being promoted. I clarified that Catherine wouldn't be a part of it. They were pretty upset initially that I hadn't let them know what was going on, but they were happy that I was handling everything maturely and hadn't sunk to their level, though they didn't agree with ghosting Catherine. After some drinks, laughs, and tears, I went home on Friday afternoon. After a busy week of organizing cleaners for the following week, the real estate agency to put my house on the rental market, and various other tasks at my hometown's office, I packed some things into my car and drove to my parents' place to say goodbye before the drive. Before leaving, I went to Becky's house. Becky had been one of Rachel's closest friends growing up. She was the only other person who knew what was happening, minus the details about Harry. Without her help, I wouldn't have been able to organize everything as quickly as I had. I gave Becky a large manila folder with my gathered evidence of her cheating, as well as the letter, and a few other legal documents from my attorney stating that she was ordered not to contact me, and the details of how to access her belongings located at the storage unit I had rented out. After a quick goodbye, I left and drove back to the city. On Sunday, I woke up to several missed calls, voice messages, and text messages. Turns out Catherine had come home early, alerted to something being afoot in town, only to find an empty house and a for rent sign out front. Freaking out, she had gone to my parents, who closed the door on her the moment they answered, forcing her to call everyone until she managed to somehow contact Becky, who told her that she had a package for her. I was told that she didn't take too well to that, as I fully knew at that point from the numerous angry texts and voice messages from her accusing me of setting up Harry, of being deceitful, etc. I was worried that she might show up at my front door, but nothing ever happened. 5 weeks later, after leaving and being promoted, I write this out for you, dear reader. Granted, it's long, and it took a few rewrites to shorten it down from my initial 14 pages, double what this story is now, but I feel that most of what I said was important enough for the story. Edit 1. Obligatory thank you, and holy cow, this blew up. Thanks for gilding this account, even though it is a throwaway account that I have no intention of using in the future. I am still at work at the moment and will, after I finish, answer as many questions as I can and provide any other updates that come my way. Edit 2. So I'm home now, and with the number of questions that are here, as well as other comments and messages I have received, I decided to take the time to answer questions and provide some clarity here, saving me from responding to everyone individually. One of the questions I keep getting asked is, what happened to Harry, why I was so hard coming down on him, and why I would incriminate myself, especially on the internet. After making some inquiries back home to some friends, the short answer is Harry is looking at a few months in prison as it's his first offense, but will be out sooner. I felt that it was necessary to the story. No one other than myself knew what I had planned to do with Harry, which is why I admitted quite a few crucial details had the potential to truly identify me, as well as change up some of the descriptive language about locations to potentially put the story anywhere in the world. Just for clarification, there was already more than enough evidence in his own home. I just provided the means for the police to further investigate his activity in his home. That being said, I don't regret doing what I did to him, as he knew both Rachel and I growing up and knew how hard it was for me to pick up my life after she died. For those also asking if I am worried about Harry finding out and pointing the authorities in my direction, I know that he doesn't use Reddit. I know Catherine has an account, but I haven't seen any recent activity to state that she has been on in some time. As for other Reddit users, who knows? Most of the people I am friends with on my main account may recognize this story, if they come across it, but as for their browsing preferences outside the subreddits that we frequent, I can't say. As for Catherine, people have questioned why I didn't do more to her, or why I stuck around for as long as I did. Honestly, I almost did kick her out after a few days, but I wanted to gather evidence and show proof of her cheating so that everyone she knew would know what she had done. She's a major socialite, her words, and I knew by exposing her it would kill her reputation. As for what happened to her, I have been told that she moved to another state just recently after being transferred. From the people I have spoken to today, she was put mainly on administrative duties before her transfer, as there was quite a bit of backlash after the rumor mill made its way around town. People have questioned the legality of what I did to her, moving all her stuff out, sending her and some friends away, spending a good amount on the trip, etc. Morally, I can see that it's a pretty dick move to build up her expectations of what she thought was going to happen. This, combined with killing her status around town, was my ultimate goal, to have her experience what it was like to have everything fall around you. But from a legal standpoint, I had every right. In the time she had been living with me, she had never updated any of her personal information, driver's license, voting registration, etc., to reflect that she had moved into my house. I found out this information during the course of my preparation with my lawyer after I spoke to her legally, with no concrete proof on paper to show that she was residing there, and because we hadn't met the de facto status, I was able to do what I did with no threat of backlash. Finally, for those of you saying how my story is fake, that I am a karma, a sociopath, in this day and age, who doesn't have some sociopathic tendencies, pointing to my malicious compliance story also as proof, I will be honest and let you know that I will not try to change your minds on this. Everyone is entitled to their opinions on stories shared all over Reddit, and opinions on those who share them. The story on the other subreddit, however, was to build karma, as my original post required me to build up enough before they would allow me to post, as they thought that I might have been a bot. That story, which I only edited in the basics of the conversation, because I can't remember all of it, did in fact take place and made national news coverage shortly after. If I find the article, I will link it, as it was, or was at the time, close to one of the largest roaming bills our company had ever passed on to a customer. Story 3. Caught my wife cheating on me with a guy, so I filed for divorce and started dating someone new. But my ex-wife stalked us, then tried to kill us with her car. Hey Reddit, I've been a long-time lurker, but today I finally have my own story to share. I've wanted to post this for months now, but honestly my life has been such a mess that I barely had time to breathe, let alone write about it. Now that everything's finally settled, I can share what happened to me, and maybe it'll help someone else avoid the same situation. Let me introduce myself. I'm a 36-year-old guy who was married to Carolyn, 35F, for what I thought would be forever, but it ended up being 6 years of my life I'll never get back. Our marriage wasn't terrible, at least that's what I kept telling myself. We met through Instagram, and I actually thought I'd hit the jackpot. She was gorgeous, funny, and seemed perfect. I was extra careful about watching for red flags because my childhood was pretty messed up. My mom was seriously abusive to my dad. I'm talking screaming matches at 3:00 a.m., plates flying across the room, and my dad just taking it all because he loved us and didn't want to leave. So you can bet I was on high alert while dating Carolyn. I spent 2 years analyzing every little thing she did, watching how she treated waiters, how she handled stress, how she dealt with money, basically everything you're supposed to check before committing to someone. Honestly, she passed every single test with flying colors. She was patient, kind, generous, everything my mom wasn't. So I thought I'd done my homework, vetted her properly, and found myself a good woman. I even remember telling my best friend that I'd finally broken the cycle of abuse in my family. Man, was I wrong about that one, but I'll get to that part later. We had this beautiful wedding, bought a nice little house in the suburbs, and started what I thought would be our happily ever after. Little did I know, I was walking straight into a nightmare, just a different kind than what I'd grown up with. Things started going downhill about 2 years in, and I mean really going downhill. We went from being the couple everyone envied to having these massive blowout fights every month, like clockwork. It was always over the stupidest things: 2 dishes in the sink, me working late, her spending too much time with her friends, or even what shows we'd watch. I was busting my ass trying to keep our marriage together, because I genuinely believed we could fix things. I mean, this was the woman who used to leave little notes in my lunchbox and surprise me with weekend trips. I couldn't understand how we'd gone from that to her screaming at me because I bought the wrong brand of coffee. I'm the type of guy who believes in fixing things instead of throwing them away, so I suggested couples therapy. Actually, I begged for it. I found this really good therapist who specialized in married couples, made all the appointments, and even paid for it out of my own pocket since Carolyn said it was my idea and my expense. We went to exactly 1 session, and holy crap, what a disaster that turned out to be. The therapist started pointing out some communication issues, suggesting that maybe Carolyn's way of handling conflict wasn't healthy. She absolutely lost it, started crying, said the therapist was attacking her, and refused to ever go back. She called the therapist a quack, and said I was trying to make her look crazy. Later, I found out her dad had died right before the fight started getting bad. I tried to be understanding about that. Grief does weird things to people, but she wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't get help, just kept getting angrier and more distant. She never got physical or broke stuff, but man, her screaming matches could wake up the whole neighborhood. Our neighbors actually called the cops once because they thought someone was being murdered. It was just Carolyn yelling about me forgetting to pick up her dry cleaning. Eventually, we fell into this weird routine where we were basically just roommates who occasionally had sex. We'd wake up, go to work, come home, eat dinner while watching TV, and go to bed, rinse and repeat. Fights got less frequent, but only because we barely talked anymore. I was still stupidly in love with her though. Isn't that pathetic? I kept thinking about our early days, convinced myself that if we just tried hard enough we could get back there. I believed in our marriage vows, that whole for better or worse thing. I guess I forgot that forsaking all others was part of those vows too, but I'll get to that part. Maybe I should have seen the warning signs, but I was raised to believe that marriage is sacred. Unless someone's getting hit or cheated on, you stick it out and work on it. Well, turns out one of those deal breakers was just around the corner, and I had no idea what was coming. Let me set the scene for you all about how everything fell apart. I worked this boring corporate job. Nothing fancy, just your typical mid-level position, pushing papers and attending endless meetings, the kind where you're important enough to travel, but not important enough to fly first class. I had been sent to this business expo in another state, supposed to be there for 4 days, schmoozing with clients and pretending to care about PowerPoint presentations. Here's where my life decided to take a massive dump on me. 3 days into the expo, our office back home had some major crisis, something about servers crashing and losing client data. Typical corporate emergency stuff. My boss called everyone back early, and being the dedicated employee I am, or maybe just an idiot, you decide, I immediately booked the first flight home. I had this stupid romantic idea in my head. You know those movies where the husband surprises his wife and they have this magical reunion? Yeah, I actually thought that would happen. I spent my entire Uber ride from the airport planning this surprise, stopped at this fancy florist, and dropped $80 on her favorite flowers, these expensive purple orchids she always said reminded her of our first date. I even grabbed some wine and those fancy chocolates she likes. I was thinking maybe this could be our fresh start. We'd been so distant lately, just going through the motions, and I thought this spontaneous gesture might remind her of why she fell in love with me in the first place. I got home around 2 p.m., feeling like the world's best husband with my flowers and chocolates. The house looked normal. Her car was in the driveway, which made sense since she worked from home on Thursdays. I remember noticing some weird things though, like her favorite playlist was blasting from upstairs, which she only ever played when she was in a really good mood. There were 2 wine glasses in the sink, but I figured she'd had a friend over for lunch or something. God, I was so naive. I walked straight upstairs to our bedroom, excited to surprise her. The music was getting louder, and I could hear some other noises too, but my brain wasn't processing what they meant. You know that moment in horror movies where everyone's screaming at the character not to open the door? I was that character. I turned the doorknob, pushed open the door to my own bedroom, and my entire world imploded. Every single happy memory, every moment of trust, every I love you, all of it turned to ash in that single second. What I saw in that bedroom will be burned into my brain until the day I die. There was my wife, the woman I'd spent 6 years loving, supporting, and building a life with. Underneath, some random dude in our bed, the same bed where we talked about having kids someday, the same bed where I'd held her when her father died. She wasn't even trying to be quiet about it, just going at it like I didn't even exist, like our marriage meant absolutely nothing. The flowers I bought dropped to the floor as I stood there, like a complete idiot, watching them scramble like cockroaches when you turn on the lights. The guy, and I'll never forget this, had the nerve to try and just run past me like I was some kind of doormat. He was frantically trying to put on his clothes, dropping stuff everywhere, and I just snapped. Maybe it was seeing him with my wife, or maybe it was how he thought he could just walk away from destroying my marriage, but something in me broke. Before I even realized what I was doing, my hand was around his throat, not squeezing to kill him or anything, but definitely letting him know he wasn't just walking out of there. I actually ended up slapping him, not punching him, like you'd expect. Just 2 open-handed slaps across his face like some dramatic housewife in a soap opera. Even now, I don't know why I didn't just punch him instead. The guy's face went from scared to angry real quick, like he was actually going to try and fight me in my own house after I caught him with my wife. Can you believe the audacity? The absolute disrespect. I bet he didn't even know Carolyn was married. She probably fed him some story about being single or separated. He probably thought I was some crazy ex-boyfriend or something. I let him go before things could escalate further. Not because I was scared, but because in that moment, I realized this pathetic excuse of a man wasn't worth catching an assault charge over. He wasn't the one who made vows to me. He wasn't the one who promised to love and cherish me till death do us part. He was just another dick who couldn't keep it in his pants. The real betrayal was still in that bedroom, probably thinking about how to lie her way out of this one. When I turned back to face Carolyn, my whole body was shaking. There she was, the woman I'd given everything to for 6 years, fumbling with her bra like this was just some minor inconvenience in her day. The purple orchids I'd bought were scattered across the floor, probably crushed under that guy's feet as he ran out. I just stood there, watching her fix herself up in the mirror, the same mirror I'd hung up for her last Christmas because she said it had better lighting. She was taking her sweet time too, like she hadn't just nuked our entire marriage, just casually smoothing down her hair, avoiding my eyes in the reflection, acting like she hadn't just destroyed everything we built together. You want to know what this woman, who I caught literally in the act of cheating, had the balls to say to me? She looked at me with this annoyed expression, like I'm some door-to-door salesman who interrupted her day, and goes, "Why are you even back?" Not "I'm sorry" or "I can explain," or any of that basic human decency stuff. Nope, she was actually irritated that I had the audacity to come home early and catch her cheating in our bed in our house that we bought together, that I paid the majority of the mortgage on. I've never wanted to hit someone so badly in my life. My hand was actually twitching, remembering how good it felt to slap her partner, but I just stood. There I was, paralyzed, while she had the nerve to mutter under her breath, "You weren't supposed to be back." Like this was somehow my fault, like I was the one who did something wrong by coming home early, like I should have called ahead to schedule a convenient time to catch her cheating. The absolute audacity of this woman. 6 years of marriage, and this is what it meant to her. A minor inconvenience in her afternoon of fun. You know what's really messed up? I could see our wedding photo right there on the nightstand. And while all this was happening, the same nightstand, and where she'd put the breakfast in bed, I made her just last weekend, the same room where she'd been telling me she was too tired for sex for the past 3 months. Meanwhile, she clearly had plenty of energy for this random dude. I just stood there like an idiot, my mind racing through every late night at work she'd told me about, every girls' night out, every time she said she was visiting her mom. How long had this been going on? How many other men had been in my bed? I was about to find out because Carolyn wasn't done talking yet, not by a long shot. And then this woman, this absolute piece of work, completely lost it. She started screaming at me like I was the one who had just blown up our marriage. "You weren't supposed to be back," she shrieked, her face getting all red and blotchy like it did during our fights. "This is your fault. If you had just told me you were coming home, you would never have seen this." The mental gymnastics this woman was pulling would have won her an Olympic gold medal. She actually had the nerve to blame me for catching her cheating. But wait, it gets better. "I asked you for an open relationship, and you said no." She screamed like that somehow made what she did okay. Yeah, she had asked me once during a drunk conversation 6 months ago, and I had said no because I believed in monogamy. Apparently, in her twisted mind, that meant she should just go ahead and do it anyway. "I have needs," she kept yelling. like I was some kind of monster for expecting basic loyalty from my wife. I tried to do things without hurting you. The absolute insanity of that statement. She tried to feign concern for me, how considerate of her. Something in me snapped. 6 years of love, trust, and dedication reduced to I have needs? Every kiss, every I love you, every moment we shared, all fake. I crossed that room in 3 steps, my hand shaking with rage. I grabbed her by the collar of that shirt, the same shirt I bought her for her birthday last month, and raised my fist. I wanted to hurt her like she hurt me. I wanted her to feel something, anything that matched the pain tearing through my chest. But then I saw the fear in her eyes, real, genuine fear. And even though she just destroyed everything I believed in, even though she just shown me that our entire marriage was a lie, I couldn't do it. I'm not that guy. I refuse to be that guy. My mom used to look at my dad with that same fear, and I swore I'd never put that look on anyone's face. So I let go of her shirt and stepped back, my fists still clenched but lowered. The dark part of me still wishes I had given in to that rage just to make her feel a fraction of my pain. But I'm glad I did, not because she didn't deserve it, but because I deserved better than becoming what I always feared. There I was, standing in my own bedroom, surrounded by crushed purple orchids, staring at this stranger, wearing my wife's face. 6 years of marriage, and this was how it ended, with her blaming me for catching her cheat. The woman who used to kiss me goodbye every morning was now standing there telling me it was my fault for not calling ahead to schedule my discovery of her affair. The second I let go of her shirt, this woman switched personalities faster than a TV channel. Suddenly, she wasn't scared anymore, no, now she was the victim in all this. You were going to hit me? Really? She screamed at my back as I walked away. This is exactly why I don't love you anymore. You're not even a real man. She kept going, her voice following me down the hallway, spewing every insult she could think of. 6 years of marriage, and she was trying to provoke me into becoming the bad guy in the story. Real convenient how she went from trembling in fear to screaming insults at the guy she just claimed was about to hit her. It wasn't until I talked to my buddy later that night that it clicked. She wanted me to hit her. Can you believe that? She wanted me to snap and give her something she could use against me, turning herself from the cheating wife into the abused spouse. Probably had it all planned out. She'd run to the cops with a bruised face, cry about her abusive husband, and walk away with half my stuff and monthly alimony checks. The same woman who used to bring me soup when I was sick was now trying to bait me into domestic violence. The manipulation was almost impressive, in a sick sort of way. I had to get out of that house. The whole place reeked of betrayal, and I mean that literally. Their perfumes and colognes were mixed together in our bedroom, on our sheets, in our air. The same bed where I'd held her through anxiety attacks was now tainted with another man's scent. I grabbed my wallet and keys and just drove. I ended up at my friend Mark's place. Thank God for Mark. He took one look at my face and broke out the whiskey. Mark's been divorced before, so he knew exactly what I was in for. He laid it out straight. I needed to lawyer up ASAP. But here's the kicker. I was making 6 figures while Carolyn was working part-time at some boutique, basically playing at having a career. In my state, that meant I was looking at paying this cheating woman alimony. The same woman who just had another man in our bed might get to drain my bank account every month. The justice system's funny like that. You can be the one who gets cheated on and the one who has to pay for it. But Mark, smart bastard that he is, pointed out that infidelity could change the alimony calculations. Document everything. He told me every text, every email, every receipt, anything that proved she was stepping out on me. Finally, some good news in the show. Maybe I wouldn't have to bankroll her affair partner's dates after all. Still, my head was spinning. Just this morning, I'd been a happily married man planning a surprise for my wife. Now, I was sitting in my friend's living room, Googling divorce lawyers and trying not to throw up every time I remembered what I'd walked in on. There was absolutely no way I was going to try and fix things with her. I might be dumb enough to buy expensive flowers for a cheating wife, but I'm not stupid enough to forgive one. While I was sitting at Mark's place trying to process everything, my phone started blowing up. Carolyn had apparently decided that since she couldn't manipulate me in person, she'd try to break me down through text messages instead. And holy, you guys wouldn't believe the stuff this woman sent me. This was a woman who just last week had sent me cute little heart emojis and I love you texts. Now, she was sending me detailed comparisons of my manhood versus her affair partners. She actually took the time to write out in explicit detail how much better he was in bed than me, how he could satisfy her in ways I never could, how she'd been faking it with me for years. She sent me a whole damn novel about all my sexual inadequacies, complete with size measurements and performance reviews, like she was writing a Yelp review for a bad restaurant. She even had the nerve to tell me that her guy had ruined her for other men, as if I was going to want her back after catching her cheating in our own bed. But this part, she was absolutely livid that I'd ruined her good thing. Can you believe that? She was mad at me for interrupting her affair, like I should have given them privacy or something. Called me selfish for coming home early without warning her, said I'd destroyed her chance at real happiness. The mental gymnastics this woman was pulling would have impressed Olympic judges. Thank God Mark was there, because he immediately told me to screenshot everything. Document, 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 he kept saying, and man was he right. Not even a minute after her epic rant about her amazing affair partner and my supposed shortcomings, I watched those little message bubbles start disappearing one by one. Guess she finally realized that confessing to adultery in writing might not be the smartest move when your husband makes 3 times what you do, and divorce is on the horizon. After she deleted all the evidence of her affair, she switched to just regular old insults, called me every name in the book, but carefully avoided any mention of her afternoon activities. It was actually kind of impressive how quickly she went from bragging about her affair to pretending it never happened. Watching those messages disappear in real time was like watching someone try to clean up evidence at a crime scene. Too bad she didn't know I had screenshots of everything. She might have deleted the messages, but she couldn't delete the truth or the pictures of them that were now safely stored in my phone's camera roll, ready to show a divorce judge exactly why I shouldn't have to pay this woman a dime in alimony. Mark turned out to be a goldmine of divorce advice that night. Between shots of whiskey, he walked me through everything I needed to do, from securing my bank accounts to collecting evidence. I barely slept that night. I just kept replaying everything in my head while scrolling through divorce lawyer reviews on my phone. The next 2 weeks were a blur of consultations with different attorneys. Some wanted retainers that cost more than my car, others seemed like they barely passed the bar exam. I finally found this guy, Lucas, who seemed to actually give a damn about my case and didn't require me to sell a kidney to afford him. When I showed Lucas the screenshots of Carolyn's text meltdown, along with pictures of the state I found our bedroom in, he actually smiled and said we had a solid case to minimize or even eliminate alimony. But he was also realistic, warning me that judges in our state tend to favor the lower-earning spouse regardless of why the marriage ended. Still, he promised to fight tooth and nail for me. Honestly, just having someone in my corner who knew what they were doing felt like the first good thing to happen since this nightmare started. Then came the fun part, serving Carolyn with divorce papers. You want to know what this woman did? She dodged the server for 3 weeks, changed her schedule, pretended not to be home, even had her mom tell the server she'd moved to Florida. The server finally caught her coming out of a yoga class, probably the only honest exercise she'd gotten in months. Even then, she took the full 30 days allowed by law to respond. Pure spite move. She knew exactly what she was doing, dragging everything out as long as possible because she knew I was paying Lucas by the hour. And oh boy, once the proceedings actually started, Carolyn turned into the queen of petty. She forgot to bring required documents to meetings, showed up late to every single appointment, claimed she couldn't find bank statements that I knew she had, and demanded detailed inventories of everything in the house down to the last spoon. Her lawyer kept sending these ridiculous settlement proposals. She wanted the house, my $401k, and still wanted alimony on top of it all. The absolute audacity of this woman, who I caught cheating, asking for half my retirement savings. The most infuriating part, we'd been separated for months at this point, and she was still seeing her affair partner. Yeah, I found that out through mutual friends living her best life while deliberately trying to make mine as difficult as possible. Every time we got close to agreeing on something, she'd suddenly change her mind or come up with new demands. It was like she was getting some sick pleasure out of watching me waste money on legal fees. Each time Lucas had to respond to another one of her ridiculous proposals, I could practically hear her laughing all the way to her boyfriend's bedroom. While Carolyn was doing her best to drag out the divorce and drain my bank account, I tried to get back into the dating scene. Not my proudest moment, but I went through a phase of hooking up with random women from dating apps. I downloaded Tinder, Bumble, all that stuff. I had a few one-night stands, trying to convince myself that this was what moving on looked like, but every morning after felt worse than the last. Each meaningless hookup just reminded me why I'd said no when Carolyn suggested an open relationship. That lifestyle just wasn't me. I've always been the type of guy who wants to wake up next to the same person every morning, share inside jokes, and build a real connection. The whole casual sex scene made me feel empty inside, like I was trying to fill a hole with the wrong shape. I needed something else to occupy my mind besides work, divorce papers, and disappointing hookups. Before Carolyn came along and life got crazy with 60-hour work weeks and monthly screaming matches, I used to be a huge reader, like stay up all night to finish a book kind of reader. So one Saturday, instead of swiping through dating apps or checking my lawyer emails, I decided to visit this little indie bookstore downtown. You know the type. Creaky wooden floors, that amazing old book smell, cats sleeping in the windows. I was standing in the sci-fi section, feeling completely lost because apparently the entire genre had evolved while I was busy trying to save my marriage. I'm talking about these thick books with titles I couldn't even pronounce, series that were like 15 books long. I must have looked pretty pathetic, just staring at the shelves with this confused look on my face, because this woman next to me actually laughed. Not in a mean way, just this soft, amused sound. She was holding this massive book that could have doubled as a weapon, and when I turned to look at her, she just smiled and asked if I needed help. I told her I was looking for some good sci-fi but had no idea where to start. Next thing I know, we're sitting in these comfy chairs in the corner, and she's giving me a crash course in modern science fiction. She was passionate about it too. Her eyes lit up when she talked about her favorite books, and she had this adorable habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she got excited about a particular series. What started as a quick book recommendation turned into a 2-hour conversation about everything from classic Asimov to modern space operas. She told me about the series she loved about parallel universes, and I shared stories about my old favorites from college. It was the first real conversation I'd had in months that didn't involve lawyers, divorce papers, or bad Tinder pickup lines. For those 2 hours, I completely forgot about Carolyn and all the drama. I was just a guy talking about books with a beautiful woman who actually seemed interested in what I had to say. After our impromptu book club session, I finally worked up the courage to ask for her number. My hands were actually shaking while putting it in my phone, pretty pathetic for a 36-year-old man, but something about her just made me feel like a teenager again. I walked out of that bookstore with her number, her recommendation for The Three-Body Problem, and the first genuine smile I'd had in months. I kept rereading our text conversation that night, and it hit me how different it felt from all those empty Tinder messages. There was something real there. On our first real date, I knew I had to tell her about my ongoing divorce. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times, expecting her to run for the hills when I mentioned my psycho soon-to-be ex-wife. But Emma, yeah, that's her name, just took a sip of her wine and said, "I appreciate your honesty. We all have baggage, and at least you're dealing with yours." Just like that, no judgment, no weird looks, no awkward attempts to change the subject. She even joked that dating a guy going through a divorce meant she'd never have to wonder if he was secretly married. Emma was like the anti-Carolyn in every way. Where Carolyn would scream during arguments, Emma would calmly discuss. Things where Carolyn demanded attention, Emma gave it freely. She was genuinely interested in my work, remembered little details about things I'd mentioned weeks ago, and never once made me feel bad about my divorce situation. For the first time in years, I felt seen and heard. His part? I wasn't even looking for her when we met. No dating apps, no setups from friends, just two people connecting over science fiction in a bookstore. You can't make this stuff up. 5 months into dating, Emma and I were falling hard. Everything felt right with her. The way she'd send me book recommendations during work, how she'd leave little notes in the books she lent me, and the way she actually listened when I talked about my day. But Carolyn was still dragging out the divorce, throwing up roadblock after roadblock. Every time I thought we were close to finalizing it, she'd find some new way to delay things: missing signatures, disputed assets, sudden remembered joint accounts. You name it, she tried it. Emma was incredibly patient through all of this. She never pressured me about the divorce or complained about being with a technically married man. She just held my hand through the frustrating calls with Lucas, and reminded me that this too would pass. I was finally starting to feel happy again, really happy, not just pretending to be okay. Happy, of course. That's exactly when everything went completely off the rails. Emma and I had just had this perfect Saturday together. We'd gotten lunch at this cute little cafe, done some shopping, and were heading back to her car in the mall parking lot. The sun was setting, and we were talking about what movie to watch that night. 1 second, I'm listening to her laugh about something, and the next second my whole world explodes into chaos. I heard it before I saw it, this engine just screaming like someone had floored the gas pedal. When I turned towards the sound, there was this car barreling straight at us, but mainly aiming for Emma. Pure instinct kicked in, and I grabbed her arm to yank her away, but I wasn't fast enough. The car clipped her leg, and I watched in horror as it just snapped. The sound of her bone breaking mixed with her scream is something that will haunt me forever. She collapsed onto the pavement, and I went down with her, trying to shield her body with mine. I had my phone out to call 911 when I heard tires screeching again. The car had smashed into another vehicle, and was now backing up, engine still roaring. That's when I realized this wasn't an accident. This driver was trying to hit us again. Emma was sobbing in pain, her leg bent at this horrible angle, and I knew if I didn't move her, we were both dead. I grabbed her under the arms and dragged her between two parked cars, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would explode. She was crying out in pain with every movement, but I had to keep going. The car charged forward again, smashing into the vehicles we'd just been hiding between. The crash was so violent it set off every car alarm in the vicinity. By this point, people were running towards us from every direction, phones out, screaming. The whole parking lot was chaos, car alarms blaring, people yelling, Emma crying in pain next to me. That's when the driver's door opened, and I swear to God time just stopped because there was Carolyn, stepping out of the car like she was arriving for a dinner party. She looked exactly like she had the last time I'd seen her, at our lawyer's office, except now she had this wild look in her eyes that I'd never seen before. She was wearing the same jacket she used to wear to work, her hair done perfectly like always, looking for all the world like she hadn't just tried to murder 2 people in broad daylight. The complete disconnect between her normal appearance and what she'd just done made it even more terrifying. This wasn't some random road rage incident or drunk driver. This was my soon-to-be ex-wife, who had apparently been stalking us and decided that if she couldn't have me, she'd rather see me dead. And she didn't just try to kill me. She specifically aimed for Emma, who'd never done anything except make me happy again. Looking at Emma's broken leg, hearing her whimpers of pain, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about me and Carolyn anymore. She just tried to kill an innocent woman whose only crime was dating her soon-to-be ex-husband. I held Emma close, trying to keep her calm while also keeping one eye on Carolyn, terrified she might have a weapon or try to finish what she started. Watching Carolyn step out of that car was like watching someone transform into a monster right in front of me. This wasn't the woman I'd been married to for 6 years. This wasn't even the woman I'd caught cheating in our bed. This was something else entirely, a rage-filled creature wearing my ex-wife's face. The reality of what just happened hit me like a ton of bricks. Carolyn had actually tried to murder us, not in a heat of the moment thing, but in a premeditated, calculated way. She had to have followed us, waited for the right moment, and then deliberately tried to run us down in broad daylight. When she started walking toward us, her heels clicking on the pavement like some twisted countdown, I genuinely thought she was going to try to finish what the car hadn't managed to do. Her face was completely blank except for her eyes. They were burning with this intense hatred I'd never seen before, not even during our worst fights. Thank God some guy, built like a linebacker, she grabbed her before she could reach us. Even then, she kept trying to push forward like some rabid animal straining against a leash. I was holding Emma, trying to keep her calm and assess her injuries, but I couldn't take my eyes off Caroline. This woman had sat across from me at countless dinners, slept next to me for 6 years, talked about having kids together, and now here she was, having just tried to murder me and my girlfriend in a shopping mall parking lot. The disconnect between those two versions of her was making my head spin. How do you process the fact that someone you once loved enough to marry had just tried to kill you? The cops showed up with their sirens blaring, followed by an ambulance. As they loaded Emma into it, she was in so much pain, but still trying to smile at me to let me know she was okay. Caroline completely lost what was left of her mind. As the officers were cuffing her, she started screaming at the top of her lungs, "It hasn't been a year, and you're already walking around with that." The pure venom in her voice made everyone around us take a step back. Here she was, having just attempted murder in front of dozens of witnesses, and somehow in her twisted mind, she was the victim. The absolute insanity of it all hit me right then. This woman had cheated on me in our bed with some random guy. I literally walked in on her doing it. She's the one who broke our marriage vows, who blamed me for catching her, who dragged out our divorce just to be spiteful, and now she's screaming about betrayal while being arrested for attempted murder. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. She destroyed our marriage by cheating, and now she was acting like I was the bad guy for moving on. Standing there in that chaotic parking lot, watching my ex-wife being stuffed into the back of a police car while still screaming obscenities, with my girlfriend's blood on my hands from where I tried to help her, I felt like I was living in some twisted alternate reality. The woman I'd married, who used to make me breakfast on Sundays and send me cute text messages during work, had just tried to murder 2 people in cold blood. And the craziest part? She genuinely seemed to believe she was justified in doing it. Like catching her cheating somehow made me the bad guy in this story. Every time I visited Emma in the hospital, I kept expecting her to tell me it was over. I mean, who could blame her? 5 months into dating a guy and his psychotic soon-to-be ex-wife tries to turn her into a hood ornament. That's not exactly the kind of baggage most people sign up for. Her leg was in this massive cast. She was facing months of physical therapy, and it was all because she had the misfortune of dating me. Couldn't even look her in the eye when I told her who the driver was. I just stared at the hospital floor and waited for the inevitable "I can't do this anymore." But Emma, she just reached for my hand and said, "Well, at least we know she'll have plenty of time to work on her road rage in prison." She actually made a joke about it, this woman lying in a hospital bed with pins in her leg, because my ex-wife tried to murder her, was trying to make me feel better. When I asked her if she was sure she wanted to stay with me after all this, she looked at me like I was crazy. "What? You think I'm going to let her win? She's going to prison and I'm going to walk again just fine. I'd say I'm coming out ahead in this one." The district attorney's office was all over this case like white on rice. Turns out multiple security cameras caught the whole thing in glorious HD. The footage was chilling. You could see Caroline's car circling the parking lot first, like a shark looking for prey. Then she parked for a while, just watching us. Yi said this was crucial because it proved premeditation. She didn't just happen to see us and snap. She stalked us, waited for the perfect moment, and deliberately tried to kill Emma. They had footage of her making at least 3 passes by our location before she finally gunned it straight at us. The security footage was like something out of a horror movie. You could see the exact moment she spotted us, how she waited until we were in the perfect position, and then just floored it. The cameras caught everything. The initial hit that broke Emma's leg, Carolyn backing up for another try, me dragging Emma between the cars. The DA said it was one of the clearest cases of attempted murder she'd ever seen. No room for temporary insanity or heat of passion defenses. This was cold, calculated attempted murder caught on multiple cameras from multiple angles. Craziest part? In the footage, you can see her checking her makeup in the rear-view mirror right before she tried to kill us, just casually fixing her lipstick like she was heading to a business meeting, not attempting a double homicide. The prosecutor said this was another nail in her coffin, showing she was completely aware and in control of what she was doing. She wasn't some woman who snapped in a jealous rage. She was someone who carefully planned to murder her ex-husband's new girlfriend and made sure her makeup was perfect for her mugshot. Afterward, the whole divorce process got put on hold because apparently, trying to murder your ex's new girlfriend takes precedence over splitting up the china collection. I spent months going back and forth on what to do next. Forth between work, the hospital for Emma's recovery, and the courthouse. My boss was understanding at first, but after the 10th time I had to leave work for legal matters, I could tell his patience was wearing thin. I was burning through PTO like crazy, spending hours with prosecutors and basically living at the courthouse, all because my ex-wife couldn't handle the fact that I moved on after she cheated. The trial itself was like watching a master class in how to send someone to prison. The prosecutors had this mountain of evidence that just kept growing. First, there were the security cameras, 6 different angles of Carolyn trying to turn Emma into roadkill. Then came the parade of witnesses. Seemed like everyone in that parking lot had stuck around to give statements. The soccer mom who saw the whole thing while loading groceries, the teenager who recorded it all on his phone, the retired cop who grabbed Carolyn before she could finish what she started. One after another, they all told the same story. This wasn't an accident. This was attempted murder in broad daylight. Emma was incredible on the stand. Even with her legs still in a cast, she told her story without breaking down, described how it felt to see the car coming, the pain of her legs snapping, the terror of realizing Carolyn was coming back for another try. I had to testify, to tell the jury about finding Carolyn cheating, the divorce drama, the threatening texts, everything. Carolyn just sat there the whole time, trying to look remorseful, dabbing at her eyes with tissues. The jury saw right through it. When the verdict came back, it was guilty on all counts. Attempted murder, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, reckless endangerment, the works. But then came the sentencing, and that's when things got frustrating. 12 years, that's all she got. 12 years for premeditated attempted murder, and she could get out even earlier with good behavior. The judge bought her. "Oh, I'm so sorry, I wasn't thinking clearly" act. She sat there crying about how she lost control and deeply regretted her actions. Meanwhile, I'm sitting there thinking about how she checked her makeup before trying to kill us. The prosecutors tried to explain it to me. First, time offender, no prior record, showed remorse, blah blah blah. But come on, 12 years. She tried to murder 2 people in cold blood. She stalked us, planned it out, and would have tried a 3rd time if that bystander hadn't stopped her. Emma could have died. I could have died. And Carolyn could be out in less than a decade if she plays nice in prison. The justice system's funny like that. You can try to murder someone in front of dozens of witnesses and still get less time than some guy caught with drugs. But you know what really got me during the sentencing? Carolyn actually had the nerve to turn to us and apologize, saying she wasn't herself that day, as if there's ever a version of yourself where it's okay to try and murder people in a parking lot. Emma just stared her down the whole time, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a response. 12 years might not be what we hoped for, but at least it meant 12 years where we didn't have to look over our shoulders in parking lots. Funny how attempting murder really changes a judge's perspective on alimony. After the criminal trial, the divorce proceedings suddenly became incredibly simple. Carolyn had to attend via video link from prison, looking fantastic in her orange jumpsuit. Her lawyer tried to argue for some of my assets, but the judge shut that down real quick. Turns out judges aren't super sympathetic to spouses who try to murder their ex's new partners. The judge actually said, and I quote, "The court isn't in the business of rewarding attempted murderers with alimony." She got exactly what she came into the marriage with: her clothes, her personal items, and her prison commissary account. The look on her lawyer's face when the judge denied every single one of their requests was priceless. No alimony, no share of my $401k, no claim to the house, nothing. All those months she spent dragging out the divorce, all those ridiculous demands and delayed meetings, and in the end, she played herself. If she hadn't tried to turn Emma into a speed bump, she might have actually gotten something in the divorce. Instead, she got a prison cell and divorce papers that basically said, "You get nothing." I couldn't stay in that apartment. though too many memories of walking in on her with that guy. Every time I walked through that bedroom door, I'd see them there. Emma and I found this great place closer to downtown. It's actually way nicer than my old apartment. It has this amazing view of the city, and most importantly, no ghost of my cheating ex-wife haunting the bedroom. Emma has fully recovered now. You can barely tell her leg was ever broken. She jokes that getting hit by a car was totally worth it because it got rid of my crazy ex forever. Dark humor, but hey, whatever helps you cope with almost being murdered, right? Sometimes I wonder if I could have avoided all this. Maybe I should have seen the red flags when she started picking fights over nothing. Maybe I should have run for the hills when she refused to continue couples therapy. But honestly, crazy doesn't always wave a big red flag. Sometimes it hides behind a beautiful smile and whispered, "I love you," until one day it tries to murder your girlfriend in a parking lot. At least now I can say I'm genuinely happy. Emma and I are talking about getting married next spring. Seems fitting since we met over science fiction books, and now we're living our own crazy story with a happy ending. Sure, Carolyn will get out eventually, but that's what training orders are for. Plus, Emma's dad is a gun instructor and made sure we both got our concealed carry permits, just in case Carolyn decides to try for round 2 when she gets out. For anyone dealing with divorce or crazy exes, document everything, keep your guard up, and maybe avoid mall parking lots. And if you're dating someone new after a divorce, maybe do a background check first, or at least make sure they're not the type to try and murder people over a breakup. Thanks for reading my crazy story, Reddit. Looking forward to reading all your comments, especially the car puns. Emma's personal favorite is, "Guess your ex-wife really drove that relationship into the ground." Yes, Emma and I still shop at that bookstore. No, we don't park in that mall anymore.